Hey there, it's Evan Nathaniel Grimm, and welcome to my April 2025 forecast and horoscopes. And I apologize for posting this so late in the month of March, but I've been traveling a lot. So, anyways, I will, as always, look at the global trends, make some predictions, translate all of the major transits, and then interpret them in the context of each zodiac sign. So, you'll want to watch the entire thing, both again, the more societal predictions and the individual sign predictions. But without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. We're going to look at the skies together. And, I want to start off, though, before I even talk about April, looking at the solar eclipse, partial solar eclipse in Aries that actually ends the month of March, but very much sets the tone for, the month ahead in April. So, what's significant about this partial solar eclipse? Well, it's happening the day before Neptune enters Aries. And also, it's the sixth consecutive new moon at 9 degrees of its, respective zodiac sign. So, going all the way back to November 1st of 2024, we've had new moons at 9 degrees, starting with that Scorpio new moon at 9 degrees back in November. And the ninth degree is a Sagittarius degree. And Sagittarius deals with beliefs, perspective. And so theoretically, over these past few months, we have been over time sort of massaging our perspective on a range of things. I mean, this could be, pertaining to really anything unique to you, but societally, socially, I do feel like the perspectives have been changing, as I've talked about in many videos in the past. But also, the ninth degree being a Sagittarius degree, we actually do think about Sagittarius as long distance travel. So, even from that vantage point, the all these fiascos in with airplanes, airplane incidents, crashes, taking off, like in the Southwest incident, taking off, in the taxi lane. There's been all these bizarre events which I've talked about in months in advance, but this partial solar eclipse is not doesn't have to be about that, by the way. But this partial solar eclipse is the final eclipse in the Aries Libra cycle of eclipses that have been ongoing, off and on, I guess, since April of 2023. And every April for the past 3 years now, we've had some type of solar eclipse in Aries. Um, Starting with the solar hybrid eclipse in 2023, the total solar eclipse in 2024, and now the partial. And this is, I think, good news for the cardinal signs in a lot of ways because the cardinal signs have a third crack at this, with Aries being motivation, initiation, taking a risk to try something new. It's about new ventures. Even though Mercury is still retrograde and Venus is still retrograde, I still see this as a powerful reinvigoration, reanimation, especially for the cardinal signs, but really for anyone who feels like they've been sort of stymied by, self-consciousness, hesitation, to do something. This is a powerful Genesis. Now, it is ruled by Mars, which is at the critical 22nd degree, the kill or be killed degree, squaring Chiron, also at the kill or be killed degree. The 22nd degree is a Capricorn degree, ruled by Saturn, which is aligned with the North Node, showing us what we need to maybe sacrifice or give up in order to evolve or grow or move forward. But Mars square Chiron is very frustrated, very kind of grating, and it feels almost like somebody is, bursting at the seams over a seemingly minuscule thing. So this new moon could bring in for some people a frustrated energy, and unfortunately, this Mars Chiron square has been dragging on for so many months now that I think it is correlated with many of the like fires we've seen, especially with like the airplane incidents. We've seen like that Delta flight that crashed in Toronto. That plane eventually exploded. We've also seen, I think it was in Denver. There was a plane that caught on fire for some reason. We've seen other like small fires with like airlines, and I'm not saying it has to be about that again this time, but I'm just saying like with Mars square Chiron, this continuation of that theme of like frustration internally, psychologically, but also fire in the external. And Mars in Aries definitely, or sorry, Mars in Cancer also brings up continual family wounds that you might be struggling to work through. But if you feel like you have a really firm grasp of like how to navigate issues in your family, if you feel like you've maybe even balanced those out, then, I think this new moon doesn't have to be that frustrating. But if you have these unresolved parental issues or family issues that you're projecting onto other people, then, it could be a little frustrating. But anyways, my point is we're coming into April just needing this context, which is that everyone should be able to take a calculated risk. And I say calculated not because it's Aries, but because we've already seen a solar eclipse in Aries 2 years in a row, and now a third year in a row. So, like if you're a Cancer rising, and you have this in your 10th house of career, it's like maybe you're a Cancer rising who's been hesitating to take the leap in your, into a new career path, and now you can finally do it potentially. If not on the new moon, then during this cycle. Again, despite the retrogrades, I still think it is a genesis and initiation of some kind. And then March 30th, we have Neptune entering Aries, which, has implications that are so vast. It's not going to be something that fully reveals itself. Like the meaning of Neptune and Aries will not fully reveal itself on March 30th by any means. But I think throughout the month of April, it's worth noting that we're in new territory. With Neptune being in a new sign for the next 13 years, we are really reshaping the collective ideals. We are hopefully breaking down certain delusions, but also with Neptune, as always, we are potentially kind of diverting that or redirecting that idealization towards something new, right? With Neptune in Pisces, it's been the idealization of celebrity, mass media, um, misinformation, all this stuff, and or whatever that means. I know that's a loaded term, but I just think that with Neptune and Pisces, it's been very hard to like keep track of the truth in any narrative. But now that Neptune is going into Aries, we are going to begin to idealize or maybe even glorify the individual's assertion, self-assertion. We might even sort of revere or certain like war heroes, and Neptune in Aries does correlate with wars or civil wars or conflicts. And that doesn't mean that April is like the beginning of a war, but pay attention throughout April to the rhetoric, let's say between the US and other nations, or Ukraine and Russia, or China and Taiwan. Like pay attention to all of that because it might presage some kind of greater conflict in the future. Now, if you see my other YouTube videos, you know that I believe April 2026 is more likely the actual genesis of a world war. It would be pretty surprising to me if there was some kind of like breakout of into like a greater global war anytime in the next few months. But we will start to see the collapse of the old guard, which I promise is not a cliche. It's actually evidenced by the Saturn Neptune conjunction we have coming up. So, what's significant about April in this context is that Neptune is, sort of peeking into Aries for a bit this year, but really starting in April and setting again this sort of new type of energy that will eventually, I think, in the coming year, it may be part of the impetus for certain people to justify maybe certain conflicts or to mount some kind of campaign against sort of an authority or a system of authority. So, there is kind of not even a rebelliousness coming in, but like a return to the individual. So, anyways, let's start to get into the month. Just to summarize it really briefly, I think April is a restoration of momentum. So, March was possibly the quietest month of the year. But now it feels like in April, the engine is thrumming again. And also, we're facing long-term consequences in relationships. We are making immense sacrifices for the sake of either love or trust or union or other Venusian things, but also a motivation and competitiveness is returning. And then, like I said just now, before this, the collective ideal is evolving, centering more so around the individual, and all but ensuring the collapse of the old guard in the near future. That is sort of being spearheaded by the Saturn Neptune conjunction that's coming up in the summer of 2025 and early 2026 in February specifically. Saturn has so much to do with, the society we live in, the rules of the road, so to speak, the social customs and norms, governments, hierarchies, and Neptune dissolves that structure. So Saturn and Neptune aligned in 1989 near during the collapse of the Berlin Wall and eventually the dissolution of the USSR. They also formed a conjunction in 1917 during the Bolshevik Revolution when, Russia ended its monarchy and instituted a communist order. So, well, first of all, Russia is implicated often during these Saturn-Neptune conjunctions. But that conjunction coming up of Saturn and Neptune this summer and next 2026, early 2026, is at the cardinal point. Really, it's at zero Aries, the beginning of the zodiac. So there is this inevitable energy coming in of a new order, or maybe just a lack of the original centralized order. And with Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus going into Gemini, I do think decentralization is becoming a theme. It already is a theme. And so you're going to see all kinds of consortiums begin to collapse. Because, for the past millennia, I mean, for a long time, we've organized ourselves into increasingly complex systems. And I think it's reached a point where, well, I mean, it's gotten maybe too complex. And if I may, for a second, get a little philosophical here, like most tasks have been taken out of our hands as individuals because these systems are so sophisticated. Like we don't really have to solve that many problems anymore on our own. I mean, most of the problems that people solved 200 years ago on their own, we have no idea how to solve. And so we have all this time to think and no need to do much of anything except talk and think and then talk more and then read the news and then talk more. And this is pulling us, I think, away from our original intent for being on this earth. Like we have no more, well, not no more, but less communion with others. And even with the land itself. And I think that dissatisfaction will continue to rise until we return to some original form in close contact with ourselves and those around us. Like there's this sort of numbness, which I think is emblematic of Neptune and Saturn and Pisces. But in terms of the system itself, it's like the system also increasingly, even though it's more complex than ever and convoluted, it lacks integrity or seriousness. It feels increasingly arbitrary to even have it. And I don't think it reflects where we want to go. So we as a collective, I think, are feeling betrayed, but also guilty for becoming so weak as individuals. I mean, I really mean that. Like, again, I don't think we can even solve most problems that someone 100 or 200 years ago could solve. And even though we see that as advancement with technology, I think in hindsight, perhaps it's part of our de-evolution, right? So the influx of Aries energy that's coming in especially in, April, but beyond, is going to encourage the individual to re-strengthen themselves and to deprioritize systems that see them or us as helpless or victims who need assistance. So Neptune in Aries is going to, again, birth this different type of ideal where the individual returns to the center and not in a Leo way, not in a way that seeks recognition or validation, but in a way that asks, like, what can you do for yourself? Like, are you able to survive? Are you able to feed yourself? Are you able to, lift a certain thing. It's almost like we are being brought back into a more a back to basics world that is a little bit more raw and visceral. Now, obviously, that can create all kinds of chaos at scale. But I think that if you're watching the video right now and you're like, wondering how can I use this to my advantage, just again, think about how your power has been actually taken away from you under the guise of some institution or group or whatever pretending to help you. It's not that we shouldn't be helping each other and be in a cooperative society, but all this, like, again, sedentary lifestyle, just sitting around, is not really all that, I don't know, it's kind of demoralizing, honestly. So, anyways, I think that, again, it's very philosophical, but Neptune and Aries just generally will seep this into our, we'll be steeped in this, I guess, like just energetically, this idea of like wanting and needing autonomy and glorifying those who have risked everything to compete or to fight or to be tough or whatever. And we've had the past 7 years of Chiron and Aries to heal our wounded masculine, whether you're, whatever gender you are. Chiron and Aries deals with the wounded masculine. And next year in April of 2026, there's so much Aries in the transits that I really do feel that there is a high possibility of like a conscription, military draft. And that's why I work out 5 times a week now, which for me is like, wow, I really, that's a new milestone for me. I always used to work out like maybe 3 to 4 times a week, but now I'm like five. It's got to be 5 times a week. I personally want to be ready for whatever comes next year. Now we're gonna get snippets of it this year, I think, of like maybe some increasing conflict. And you can see that with the transits recently. We already have previews of that with like Mercury when it was direct at 0 Aries a couple weeks ago. The US announced that it was suspending I think financial assistance to Ukraine. And then now that Mercury's retrograde in Aries, we have this leak of like war plans by key cabinet members of the Trump administration, through that app Signal. So, like, everyone saw the messages when they, mistakenly included the Atlantic. I believe it was the Atlantic editor. But that shows you that we're dealing with topics like war when we have planets in Aries. So that already is kind of a validation that probably next year when we have Mars, Saturn, Neptune, the Sun, Mercury, and the Moon and Chiron all in Aries at the same time, like that mid-April time period is probably the scaling up of some kind of conflict. But anyways, and I wonder because Neptune's involved in that stellium, I wonder if it's like China invading Taiwan, or if it's like the US invading Canada or Greenland, which seems kind of wild, but if you look at Greenland's chart, they have Pluto and Libra. So at that time in April next year, Mars is going to be opposing their Pluto. So that does kind of feel like an invasion. And I'm not saying it will be definitely that conflict, but I think that there is, again, this immersion of the collective into this sort of Aries type energy, which is going to make people more conflict prone. I mean, could there be a civil war in the US? Not impossible with Uranus going into Gemini. But what I think is happening in the US is more so isolationist policies returning to just the individual as a nation, which is Aries. Not that the US is an Aries nation, but I'm just saying it's returning to the Aries-like individual concept. But also with Pluto and Aquarius, we're dealing with decentralization. So if you want to be thriving over the next year, think local, tap into your communities, know thy neighbor, like really um, have that camaraderie. which we've so deeply lost, right? We have a disconnection from our communities. We have a sense of isolation. And I think partly because Jupiter's in Gemini, overloading us with information online and in the media. And then it's decreasing our capacity to really socialize organically. And then Saturn in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces is encouraging us to just kind of sometimes be alone or hermit or just yeah, just isolate ourselves or to feel emotionally or energetically overwhelmed. So by the way, I think that's why a lot of people have been coming to me saying, "Oh, I don't respond anymore to text messages. I don't even have the energy to look at my text messages." That's because, again, Jupiter and Gemini in detriment, overloading us with information. Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, making us want to isolate or focus on mental health or meditation or just, escapism, right? So a lot of people, I think, are seeing the downsides of this increasingly complex world. It's like we're solving too many problems each day, and the nature of the problems are kind of dumb. I mean, it's kind of irrelevant. Like a lot of what we try to solve is not really nourishing the human condition or nourishing the soul, really, right? Like we are overthinking everything. We're constantly thinking. And I believe that sometimes thinking is the enemy. So it's like we're up to here, we're almost underwater in our own thoughts. And so I think this influx of Aries energy, and by the way, fire and air, is going to encourage us to, again, go back to basics, get back into our bodies, and to bear witness to what's actually in front of us. At least that's almost my hope. Now, again, we might witness wars, aggression, conflicts at a collective level, but individually, we're going to have these incentives all of a sudden to, um, again, look out for ourselves again, but also our communities. Because, and I hope this doesn't sound too political, but I think that in our subconscious, we are sick of watching these complex group organizations say that they're going to go solve all these problems in the world without actually helping people in their own country. Or, there is kind of a sense of disempowerment. It's sort of like, it's like having a mother who will go out of her way to like volunteer and help everyone in the community, everyone at her church or whatever. She's going out of her way for everyone except for her own children. And I think that there is a sense that regardless of your politics, it's like, okay, how like do I even have any sense of agency anymore? Am I just watching these increasingly complex governments and organizations either meld together or fight one another and just destroy themselves and also forget about the needs of the individuals in their own countries, right? Like there's something about that. I don't want to keep going down that rabbit hole, but I think everybody wants to feel like they are helping people and they are lifting other people up, but like in their own communities maybe. And also, finding people online, that's the Aquarian ideal. With Pluto, it's like, okay, we're finding our power in these wider groups and these new types of groups that we just put together through our own machinations, through social media or the internet. Like you know, let's say we all, maybe you find a community of spiritually minded people through the internet, and they're not all geographically in the same place. I mean, that's also great. But I just think that we're seeing how detached we've become from what's going on out there. And there's also a feeling that the leadership is disconnected from what's going on right here. So That's sort of my channeled explanation of where we're going. Um, but anyways, to get back to more so the ins and outs of the month ahead, what are the dominant transits in April? So first of all, we have Mars square Chiron for pretty much the first half of April. I talked about that before. It's a little frustrating and grating, but it can also help you um, be more assertive in your family, rush to protect the people you care about. We also have Neptune going into Aries. I just talked about that. And it will be in Aries until 2039. We'll get Mars in Leo April 17th, with Mars leaving Cancer where it has fallen. I think Mars in Leo will be a recharging of sorts. That's when the engine starts humming again, like I said earlier. And it will oppose Pluto, which can make people fiercely competitive, maniacally obsessed with winning. It might enmesh people in certain financial conflicts with the Sun and Taurus on April 19th, squaring the Mars and Pluto. Mars opposite Pluto can also make people somewhat hungry for domination and power. So that could translate to some kind of warmongering or, you know, saber rattling, right? We also have Venus conjunct Saturn for essentially the entire month, which is very rare, by the way. It's because Venus is stationing direct in a conjunction with Saturn. But Venus conjunct Saturn is, one of those transits where we're going to be, again, witnessing the sort of consequences of any and all decisions we've made in our relationships. So if you've been, let's say, not transparent with your partner, with the retrograde in Pisces, those lies might be revealed and the whole relationship could be a sham. And you have to pick up the pieces. Maybe you'll decide upon further reflection during Venus retrograde, and the end of the retrograde, that you just don't want to maintain the relationship anymore. Saturn shows us the work that needs to be done to maintain the relationship. And it's kind of like a reality check. And it's showing us whether or not a relationship can continue long term. So we're all kind of coming to realize like whether or not our relationships are viable long term and whether or not we're willing to put in the effort and the work to be with that person. Venus can also be creativity, income, money, values. So for a lot of you, this is a reflection of values and the personal values that you harbor and espouse and how that resonates in your relationships. Like, what are the implications of your values? Like, are you in a relationship that harmonizes with your values or not? If you're not, then by mid-April, during the Libra full moon on April 12th, you might decide to let the relationship go. Anyways, I'll talk about that a little bit more as we go. We have Mercury also conjunct Saturn. Mercury conjunct Saturn is a moment where, and that's happening around this time I'm showing you here, early April, but also even part of mid-April. Mercury conjunct Saturn feels like a disconnection from someone potentially, divorcing communication or ending communication from someone in order to, fully close out the relationship. Just you have the closure just to, close the loop. Others might get really focused and serious about a certain subject or writing project. But a lot of people in mid-April are feeling very realistic. I mean, they're thinking very realistically all of a sudden about probably a relationship that they used to idealize or used to put on a pedestal. Um, then we also have the North Node conjunct Saturn, around mid-April. And the North Node is the head of the dragon, right? And it's devouring, it's desirous. And Saturn is showing us that, hey, like things take time. And we have to be willing to wait for something or delay gratification in order to achieve something long term. So the North Node aligning with Saturn is showing us that if we want to reach the utopia, if we want to reach the ideal, we have to do that over time. It takes time to get there. And also we have to be willing to sacrifice certain things in order to get there. We have to be willing to set aside our sort of libidinic desires, our lizard brain. We have to be willing to slay the dragon, to conquer our impulses in order to wait for something that truly has staying power. Whether it's in the creative field in Pisces or some kind of maybe it's a spiritual community you want to build or a project, maybe it is a relationship that you want to create in your life. And again, even if you already have the perfect partner in your life, it's still going to show you in April that it takes work to sustain that relationship. If you haven't met that person yet, you're going to realize during this time, maybe by looking back on your old relationships, that there's still some lessons you have to learn in order to be ready for that ideal person. And with the Libra full moon, April 12th, which is the climax of not only Venus retrograde, but the South Node in Libra transits. And I say that because this full moon on April 12th is the climax of the Libra solar eclipse in October of last year, which also featured the South Node in Libra. The South Node in Libra was dredging up all these karmic relationships and showing you that certain relationships had run their course. So many people broke up or ended a partnership of some kind between July of 2023 and January of this year. That's when the South Node is in Libra. And even if you're still holding on to a relationship that is, has lost its runway for growth, by April 12th, like you're gonna realize that, whether or not it's actually meant to last. And you might be able to make it work, but if you're holding on to the past, if you're holding on to someone through pure nostalgia, or you are not even aware right now that you're caught in a loop, or counting on your partner to change, or counting on yourself to change and nothing's happening, then I don't know. I think the relationship might be over on April 12th. If you already feel good about your relationship, then this will just be confirmation of the vows that you've made, right? We also have Mars opposite Pluto. I talked about that. But let's go actually into the key ingresses, so the entry points of a planet into a sign. Neptune enters Aries March 30th. Previous month, I talked about that. We get Mercury in Aries back into Aries April 15th. And while Mercury's in Pisces in the first half of the month, you might be focused on your spirituality, some sort of abstract, creative project or topic. You might be having like sort of strange sleep patterns. You might also just feel very lost in something. But when it goes back into Aries on April 15th, it will meet up with Neptune, but I still think when Mercury goes into Aries, people will become more motivated to like argue their position about something or to have these very lively conversations. Mars goes into Leo April 17th, and that will really be also a resurgence of energy, drive, motivation. People might even participate in Leonic activities, which could be like recreational sports, performance, creativity, creative hobbies, romance. I mean, Mars in Cancer has been really, really grueling. I'm sure you would all agree. Since January 6th, we've had Mars in Cancer. Mars in Cancer retrograde, especially, has been very misdirected. It's like we get angry at the wrong things. We get pissed off in the places when we're supposed to be where we're supposed to be the most comfortable. like our homes, within our families, any place that used to be familiar and a source of comfort has become a source of tension. But luckily, Mars going into Leo will help you direct your energy outward and away from the home and away from the nest, away from the safety zone. And you will start to feel, I think, more at peace in your home, in your foundation, within your nest. And, you know, you'll just have more battery power. You'll get better sleep, especially if you're a Leo rising. And, you'll have more energy to activate out there in the world. We get the sun in Taurus April 19th. And, the sun in Taurus is, really powerful right off the bat because we're going to have the sun squaring Mars and squaring Pluto. So April 19th is like probably the most significant day of the year. Well, not the year, sorry, of the month. And it's definitely going to transform the perspective of a certain leader, probably. But even for yourself, I think you will deal with conflict very differently at that time. And you probably around April 19th will have to navigate a very stubborn conflict, a very stubborn situation, because there's a lot of fixed energy going on. And if you have any placements at 0 degrees of Scorpio, then April 19th will be this extremely tense day for you. So anyone born on, October 23rd or so will feel that. Will definitely feel the energy of that. And Mars opposite Pluto refuses to lose, by the way. So like with Mars opposite Pluto, sorry, October 22nd of 2025 this year, by the way, the sun goes into Scorpio. But anyways, those of you who have the sun at 0 Scorpio are really going to feel that. So yeah, also we have Venus entering Aries April 30th, finally going back into Aries, leaving Pisces and helping you either, start new relationships or take on a more independent attitude in relationships. And, it will conjoin Neptune. So again, there's a slight chance of idealization around April 30th in a relationship. But, Venus is in Pisces, conjunct Saturn, pretty much the whole month. So I think that we will all be grateful that Venus is leaving Pisces. Not because Venus hates Pisces. I mean, Venus is exalted there, but it's just not really fun when it's aligned with Saturn the whole time. So like, again, if your relationships are not built to last, it's going to be revealed to you in April. And I did a video about this recently. But like, if one of your exes or your ex that you've been counting on doesn't return during Venus retrograde or even in the days after, I think that's a sign that the loop is closed there, at least in this lifetime. The karma has been rebalanced. And you probably shouldn't pursue them again. With the South Node in Libra and in previous months and Saturn conjunct Venus, it's like if you have nothing left to learn from that partner, then I think it's over. If you also, again, are caught in a stagnant loop that doesn't promote growth for either partner, then it's done. Right? You want to grow with people going forward, and you also want to be with someone who you don't have to idealize. Someone who you see clearly, but you're still inspired by, and you're still inspired to do the work for that person and for that relationship. Now, in terms of the retrogrades, Mercury stations direct April 7th at 26 Pisces, which is a great thing. At that point, your decision-making capabilities will improve. You will also feel probably less foggy in your mind, and with this conjunction to Saturn, you'll be able to focus on a professional project. And then Venus stations direct April 12th, like I talked about, at 24 Pisces during the Libra full moon, which is ruled by Venus. And that is the go forward moment when you realize, okay, this is what I need to do in order to either salvage my relationship, continue it, or to free myself from that relationship. So now to dive into the noteworthy transits. more so like day by day, starting April 1st. So April 1st through 15th, actually, we have Mercury, Venus, Saturn, and the North Node all conjunct. And when there's that many celestial bodies or calculation points like the North Node packed together, it can be very hard to parse it out. It's almost like a knot. It's all kind of dynamically ping-ponging off each other. And in Pisces, I mean, I guess we can attempt to unpack this, right? Like Venus and Saturn is asking you to make long-term commitments, either to a partner, a best friend, a business partner, or to a creative project, and also to deeply contemplate the possibility of maybe having to like let go of that relationship. With the North Node there, anyone you let go of is clearing space for either your own growth journey, or a better partner. And then with Mercury there, you have a way to convey this reality to someone. Like, hey, I don't think it's going to work anymore. Or I don't think we should even talk anymore. And it's for the best. So, whatever ends around these times, first half of April, I think it's for the best. Now, collectively, this could be a major event in the healthcare industry, in a hospital system. There might be an economic shift in the maritime sort of space, meaning are driven by maritime things. So like shipping routes may change. There could be blockages in shipping. There could be oil supplies being constricted and sanctions leading to changes in the oil prices. Trump just announced tariffs on automobiles, so perhaps there could be a a shortage of, I don't know, automobile prices may rise. And by the way, economically, the whole tariffs thing is going to be pretty painful because whether you see the positives or the negatives of like tariffs in a vacuum, just like in an abstract sense, tariffs in a practical sense don't really make a lot of sense to me because while I understand that globalization has downsides for especially the United States and like the job market, especially with blue collar work, it's still like not really possible to turn a train around when it's already barreling forward. So like, I'd like to think I understand something about economics. I mean, I minored in business at Northwestern and philosophy. I had a major in philosophy, which isn't economics, obviously, but we took a class about globalization when I was a junior in 2012 at Northwestern. And we read this book by Michael Wolff, I think, called Why Globalization Works. And it just laid out a case for globalization. And, the professor was very bullish on the whole concept of globalization and, explained it to us that, the standards of living rise as you outsource, sort of manual labor to developing nations, their standards of living rise. And as their wages rise, they start to generate, a more robust economy, greater GDP, wealth and prosperity ensues, or relative wealth. And then they pass down, the manufacturing or whatever to another, even more developing nation. And it's kind of a race to the bottom. You could argue it's like a game of sweet potato where you're just tossing prosperity to the next nation. But obviously, it's also gutted the middle class in some ways in the US. And that's not the only reason the middle class has been gutted, but it is one of the reasons. And so I understand in theory why you would want to incentivize production in the US by penalizing, imports from other nations. But, it's kind of like reverting to cash at a sports venue with 10,000 people at the arena. It's like, we have these systems in place that it's not a perfect analogy, but what I'm saying is it's really hard to go back to an old system or to deploy a very antiquated economic tactic or in order to or in a society where the sort of global trade and the global economy is so robust and interconnected. It's like throwing a missile into the Death Star in some ways to like institute tariffs, at least in the short term. I mean, could there be a future where the United States has a prosperous middle class, partly driven by curbing like globalization? It is possible, but there's a lot of pain involved in the instant implementation of tariffs in the interim. So I think that, again, we've massaged the global economy to a point where tariffs are a headache, and we have outsourced so much. So like none of this is going to benefit people overnight. Like that's for sure. So Venus retrograde with Venus ruling money, markets, and conjunct Saturn the entire month, it does show that there could be some economic pain vis-a-vis these tariffs. Now, I maybe some of the tariffs will be rescinded or lifted, but regardless, I think there's been enough tariffs implemented for the damage to start to be done. I also think with Venus conjunct Saturn, tax season is going to be pretty messy because it just feels like with that Saturn conjunction, there's going to be a lot of missing revenue, let's call it, because of the understaffed agencies that oversee the whole tax situation. So, yeah, I think that that will have a significant impact on the United States. So I think tax revenue will be down. Also, we have, Venus, Saturn, and the North Node technically aligned the entire month. And that's again showing you the true nature of the work that's required of you to have that relationship, have that job, to manifest that creative work, to build that spiritual community or to attain that spiritual expertise or whatever. And I think a lot of people will seek to make their living off of maybe doing healing work or spiritual work. I also think perceptions about healthcare and health generally are changing, are continuing to change as they were since last December. And then we have Mars trining a lot of this from April 1st to 17th. And the Mars trine to Saturn is about slow and steady effort. So the first half of April is probably going to continue to be slow, like March. But once Mars goes into Leo, April 17th, all bets are off. And Mars will actually oppose Pluto from April 17th through mid-May. And that is very eruptive, very intense. And, it feels like butting heads, but maybe like refusing to lose. And, we had this opposition in November and December, but it's very vengeful. So back in 2024, I was like, don't seek vengeance, don't stew on things, don't let things like simmer within you, and you know, don't harbor resentment. So the Mars opposite Pluto transit from April 17th until the middle of May might lead certain nations to kind of like posture themselves for war, especially with Mars on the World War II Pluto position in like late April, while the North Node is conjunct Saturn. So there could be like a sort of a divorce that the US makes from other nations continuously, or nations that were previously allies become enemies. And then there's a sense that people are girding for war, even if it doesn't happen like at that time. Also, there might be some financial crimes committed at the end of April, and that aligns with tax season. I think the tax season in the US is just like really messy this year, really controversial, and I think somehow there will be like certain people who take advantage of that, or maybe a certain nation even takes possession of another nation's assets or funds. And in the second half of April, during that Sun Mars Pluto T square, I actually wouldn't be surprised if there's like currency wars that increasingly are in the news. And maybe something with crypto, but it's probably more so established like fiat currency wars. We have Mars trine Neptune from April 17th through mid-May. Also, Mars trine Neptune is kind of subtle, but it could motivate people to like put their energy towards humanitarian causes or helping people a little bit. The Sun will conjoin Chiron April 12th, which is revealing to us the inner masculine wounds that we have not healed yet. Maybe through the lens of our fathers or our own inner masculine. I just talked about the Sun, Pluto, and Mars in a T square from April 19th until about the 28th. And I actually want to go to that right now. That I mean that T square really almost gives me the chills. I mean, it is very daunting. Like you've got Saturn conjunct the North Node, Sun square Pluto, Sun square Mars. Like, is that it almost like it's like a Tiananmen Square event on a college campus in the US. That's like what I keep feeling. That's like the vision I keep having. Because, Columbia University is under duress right now. And I don't have to go into that. I think you all know why. And I think that a lot of college campuses over the springtime are going to do put on a lot of demonstrations. It's going to be a lot of protests, demonstrations, because the Trump administration is cracking down on pro-Palestinian, protesters or students or whatever. Like they're clearly taking a very hands-on approach. And what's happening in mid-April here, when the sun forms this aspect, is that I think around that time, the Trump administration will attempt to take full control of like a college campus or a university, or maybe even like a judiciary like group. I mean, who knows? But it does feel to me here like someone is crossing the line. And it might not be so literally the Tiananmen Square type of event where like a tank is on the college campus and a student stands in front of it. But it does feel kind of sacrificial in Pisces with Saturn and North Node in Pisces. And Saturn is enforcement and the law, governments. And the Saturn North Node conjunction here feels like, there is like a government like handing down this like very clear directive. And with the Sun square Mars and Pluto, these leaders are like being incredibly dogmatic and firm in their directives. And yet the students are pushing back or the judges are pushing back. And so I could even see like the culmination of a legal battle here where a judge says, you know, you can't keep deporting people without tracking what we without checking their identity or their papers. And it almost feels like there's an economic sanction here somehow, where like some powerful figure's assets are frozen. Or maybe the Supreme Court tells the president, like, You literally can't do XYZ. So I think there's going to be a lot of last minute legal directives that are issued around April 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd to stave off or, you know, put to rest the college campus sort of pandemonium that ensues. Or maybe there is demonstrations against the tariffs and the economic pain that ensues from that. And like, I don't care what your politics are. If you support the right or the left or the center or everything in between, you have to be your head has to be really far in the sand to think that the tariffs are a good idea. Like at least in the immediate term. Like we can all agree that globalization has harmful effects on the United States. Like that's just fact. But that doesn't mean that instituting tariffs is the answer. I mean, that to me is like hitting the emergency brake on the economy. And I'm not saying that there will be a recession in April, but like certainly the markets are spooked. And people are getting pretty pissed off. I know somebody who's no longer going to build a home because the lumber is too expensive, or there are some other parts involved, obviously, in the construction, but there's something that, my someone I know joked that you're going to have to like, you know, take out a loan to get a two by four. I mean, like it's obviously a joke, but it's like maybe not, right? So I think with Venus, Saturn, North Node conjunct, it's like people are seeing the consequences of these policies. And also, nations who are I think like nations like the US and Canada are increasingly cold towards one another and divorced from one another. Like I've talked about relationships ending during mid-April, but like relationships between countries might be ending too. So, yeah, I think there's, you know, international divorces going on. But, I think this T square with the Sun and Pluto and Mars is that is some kind of like financial possession or repossession of assets, or it could even be like Russia owning another nation's like assets. I think like Russia stole a bunch of like valuables from Ukraine. And also, to be honest, there could be like a financial uh breach, meaning some sort of like breach of servers or an app or social media platform, or yeah, some sort of like back end server at a financial institution or social media company. And around this time, it's not impossible that even TikTok could go away again. Or maybe there would just be this protracted discussion about who takes over TikTok. So I don't think the TikTok drama is done. I think that there might be some, you know, tension between China and the US about the algorithm or about the idea of like maybe spying. Maybe the US comes into more information that China's been spying, or maybe what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, or maybe, one like this like sort of cavalier use of like the app Signal or other ways to communicate within the Trump administration leads to a vulnerability in a cybersecurity incident. Um, but almost definitely, I'm seeing some kind of like cybersecurity incident in the financial space. Also, currency battles, like I talked about, between maybe the BRICS nations and the US. I really think there's a currency here, a major currency that is being devalued like rapidly. I don't know if it's the US dollar that's not as strong. maybe it's the Canadian dollar, but like there is a currency battle here, and there is a form of currency that's losing a lot of its relative value, for sure. And I don't know if that sparks a crypto movement or something, but yeah, this is all about currency and value with Taurus. You know, the beginning of Taurus season has a lot to do with money, finance, social media platforms with Pluto and Aquarius, opposite Mars and Leo, and food and resources. So it might be hard to get certain types of foods at this time, like through the tariffs or through retaliatory efforts by certain nations. Like if you're wondering if avocados will be hard to get from Mexico, maybe this is the point where it happens. I mean, honestly, if nothing happens where like avocados suddenly become hard to access, I wouldn't worry about it after this point. I'm just saying that there is a small chance that in mid-April, certain like food items will be hard to get. And I'm not trying to cause fear there, but and maybe even certain pharmaceutical products will be hard to get. And that's interesting. I wonder if like China will or some country will retaliate by bottlenecking certain prescriptions or the supply of certain prescriptive drugs. And a lot of people are on these instant weight loss types of drugs. Like maybe there's like sort of a study that's released in April that hey, maybe it's not such a good idea. Maybe there is no quick fix for health. There's something kind of eerie to me about how many people I've met recently who sort of they look a little bit like something changed about their face, and I can see their bone mass beginning to winnow away. And I think that's creepy, by the way. So I hope that like I want you to sit with that, right? And I'm speaking as an intuitive here. I'm not a doctor, but a lot of people have come to me bragging about all this shit they're taking. I'm watching their bone mass disappear. I don't even know what's going on if they'll have cheekbones in a couple of years. So that kind of stuff is terrifying to me. To know that millions of people are thinking that this is a good idea. So April, there might be some fallout and a reckoning from that. Because the natures of law, like the natures, or sorry, the laws of nature, I just like misordered that. There's just like laws of nature. And, every so often humanity decides we're going to find a quick fix or a shortcut to this thing. Nature always wins. So I'm not going to lecture any further about that, but like nature always wins. So just consider that when you're making these decisions about you're allowing some company to, you know, dictate, your entire health picture. Anyways, so we also have Mercury conjunct Neptune. Oh, and sorry, one other thing about that T square. I wonder if an airline executive is implicated in that T square. Like maybe they are under duress and being investigated for something. I also think some high profile figure will be investigated financially, like their accounts will be frozen or something. I talked about that, but the aviation sector will be investigated, I think. But like maybe even an executive will be investigated there for possibly taking financial shortcuts or cutting costs and also compromising safety in the process of like airplanes. Um, so also we have Mercury conjunct Neptune April 15th through 24th. Um, and that conjunction is really great for creative and spiritual channeling and work, but also really not great if you're trying to like sort of stick with reality and the truth about something. So watch out for lies around this time. Watch out for people lying to you about something. And then Venus will conjoin Neptune and Aries at the very end of the month. Um, that will bring about maybe a blissful experience in a relationship or a deceptive one. And then Uranus is conjunct Algol again for the first time since last July, while Saturn and the North Node are conjunct with Mars opposing Pluto April 28th. So I want to go to that now. So with Uranus on Algol, it's back on Trump's midheaven, and Mars is getting closer to his Pluto and JD Vance's sun. So with Saturn and the North Node also conjunct, I know I've talked about Trump and Trump predictions in the past couple of years, some of which have come true, but I continue to wonder if he's under duress here because Mars is close to his Pluto, Uranus is back on Algol, and even during the Aries solar eclipse on March 30th, or sorry, March 29th, the ruling planet of that Aries solar eclipse, Mars, is on his Saturn in the 12th house. And Mars was last on his Saturn in mid-October of last year, which I was predicting would be challenging for Trump. And I think it was briefly. Well, actually, it was because they found out in retrospect that Iran was scheming and plotting all kinds of, you know, well, they were plotting against him to a point where he had different, he had like a decoy plane and or something like that, or he was taking different planes and having only his staff on his plane, Trump Force One. So like basically April 19th through 28th, I continue to wonder if he's under duress. So that is a bit of a challenging aspect with Saturn on the North Node. It's like, wow, that's a heavy conjunction. It's like an ending in some ways. But it could be aviation related. Uranus or Pluto and Aquarius, opposite Mars on the World War II Pluto. There could also be actually around April, late April, some kind of economic sanction towards a country that is defying their own nuclear sanctions. So like maybe this is Iran. Maybe Iran is deploying or developing nuclear capabilities, or some other countries tampering with nuclear um, things, and because of that, maybe they are cut off from the United States financially. But yeah, I mean, having Mars on the World War II Pluto, while Pluto is opposing the World War II Pluto, and Uranus is back to the position it was in during World War II, and Neptune is opposing, it's pretty calamitous theoretically. Um, but yeah, in your own life, with Mars, Sun, Pluto all in a T square, just don't be too rigid, right? Like, don't get wrapped up in these, extremely aggressive battles with people. And then we have Jupiter square Saturn pretty much until or towards the end of the month, and this is going to bring about further trade tensions, travel restrictions. I think Trump will probably restrict travel from a lot of nations actually towards the end of the month. And the impending battle between the Supreme Court and the Trump administration may even come to a peak around this time, if not early June, when the square is exact. But I think in early June, there's a really big investigation into Boeing. I've talked about that before. But I think in June, there's going to be maybe a whistleblower at Boeing or somebody who, you know, just brings to light the fact that, or maybe it's an investigation from a prior thing related to Boeing, because I know that Boeing has had whistleblowers in the past, but I just feel like there's some safety corners that have been cut at some of these airline industries, or whatever. So, or these manufacturers. And also, with Mars opposite Pluto squaring the sun, I mean, I can't stress this enough. Like that April 19th T square, especially while the moon is on Pluto, which is really April 21st. I think around April 21st, a really prominent figure, a prominent leader might be taken out. I mean, it really is a daunting square or T-square. With Saturn on the North Node, I mean, and the person who is suddenly no longer here, it could influence the economy somehow. Maybe it just shocks people. I mean, there is something really tense about this. Now, if nothing happens with like somebody in that way, it could just be again a financial breach, cybersecurity attack, a social media related hack, or maybe economic sanctions, and possibly a withholding of like a certain prescription drug supply from another country or food supply. But this kind of feels like a divorce between two countries because their values don't align. And I still think China might be involved in some of this. Like I feel like China might overplay its hand in something, or they might get more aggressive about I don't know, some position that they have. I don't know if Taiwan's involved. That might be a stretch, but this could be with TikTok too. Like it just, I don't, again, I don't think the TikTok drama is over yet. And there might be just a fight at that time over who in the US, which investor in the US would take over TikTok. But yeah, with also the Pisces energy and the South Node and Virgo, continue to think about your values around health. I know mentioned that before, but what does it look like to be healthy? And how much do you value your health? I mean, you want to put that towards the top, I think. So yeah, I mean, I've kind of gone through the main transits there. And by the way, with relationships, if your relationships continue through April, it's because you've done a lot of healing work already. If you haven't done any healing work and you're just spewing vitriol at people, then your relationship's probably over. And then you'll have to, go and do some introspection. So some executive trends here, to kind of stitch all of this together. March was a slow month, right? Very introspective. People were depleted, exhausted, but I think that we should celebrate the end of Venus and Mercury retrograde in the middle of the month. And you're going to ask yourself questions like, where were you maybe deluded or misled? Did you idealize a situation or person? And also, who or what is worth the effort or sacrifice? And other predictions I have here, I'm just reviewing my predictions really quick to see if I missed anything. Oh yeah, there could be volcanic eruptions in mid-April, during that Sun and Taurus energy or like a major climate event. But probably if there was any major event, it'd be an earthquake or a volcanic eruption. Maybe another fire somewhere, but it seemed, well, I mean, Mars will return to the position it was in during the LA fires. I'm not saying LA would be implicated, but with the opposition of Pluto, it is like intensely hot and sort of smoldering. It's like, it does feel like something is waiting to erupt. I don't know if it's in Washington State, maybe. I don't know. I don't know why that jumped into my head, but maybe Washington State is dealing with some kind of eruption. Otherwise, also waterways or shipping routes could be compromised, impacting the supply of certain goods. There are possible peace accords near the Libra full moon April 12th, maybe between Ukraine and Russia. Um, but if no one lays their armor down, I do fear that we're barreling towards a broader war over the next year. Um, with again, the most likely time being April 2026. Again, there could be some tax frauds and financial scandals in the middle of April and or possession of assets. Oh yeah, the Department of Education. I mean, there's a lot of drama with that, obviously, and I do think that the educational sector is front and center in April, whether it's the college campus protests that are coming or um, state educational departments having to scramble and shuffle their curriculum around or funding being taken away for, I don't know, financial aid or something. I think students are in the toughest position right now. Like, whether it's high school or college, I think like the whole apparatus in the United States is being deconstructed. The whole educational apparatus. I think the measles outbreak is going to grow. And I think also the EU, the European Union is being forced to beef up their military presence and preparedness. I think that will continue to be a thing. Because the US is not going to help them anymore. So, I keep talking about April 2026, possible draft. I think that we've already seen how I think it was Germany is like trying to, I don't know, some European country is already making plans to try to get their all the adult males in the country ready for combat. Okay, so then we have the Libra full moon. Let's go through the new and full moons this month. The Libra full moon is on, sorry, I have to back up with the software here. It's on April 12th at 23 degrees of Libra. And the chart ruler Venus, again, it's stationing direct the same day, helping you move forward in a relationship or with money or values or income or creativity, but move forward in a way that's sustainable, durable, and realistic. And it's really teaching you all the lessons I think you were meant to learn while the South Node was in Libra. So if you were too codependent your whole life, you're realizing that here. If your partner is leading to stagnation, only that's revealed here. We also have the Sun conjunct Chiron, so it's a very healing moment. So if you're willing to be vulnerable with your partner, then, it continues to grow. We also have the Moon opposite Chiron and squaring Mars, so a lot of people might be healing old wounds in their family. Mars squares Chiron, so yeah, there's going to be some conflict that you may run into, but ultimately with Venus conjunct Saturn, you are ideally pledging allegiance or loyalty to somebody. And you're like, hey, I'm willing to give everything up for you or for this relationship in a non-codependent way, in a responsible way. And Mercury is also now direct, so you have a clear sense of like what you want to communicate and to whom. And maybe what you want to focus on creatively. And again, this is the 6-month conclusion of the Libra solar eclipse on October 2nd. So think back to October 2nd of last year. Was there some kind of seed planted in your relationship? But I think this is the fulfillment of karma in some relationships and the balancing of karma in relationships. And then we have the Taurus new moon, which is April 27th. And that one is finally breaking the streak of 9-degree new moons. So now we're getting off the 9-degree train of long distance flight and beliefs and education, actually, higher education and perspective, and getting into the 7th degree, which is a Libra degree, which deals with relationships. And by the way, that's really profound that we've had so many new moons at 9 degrees, and the Sagittarian concepts are like exactly what we've been contending with. The higher courts, higher education, travel, I mean, international relations. I mean, that is how profound the degree theory can be. And with the Taurus new moon, chart ruler Venus still conjunct Saturn. So we have two Venusian, you know, new or full moons in a row with Venus still conjunct Saturn. Really helping us internalize the lesson we were meant to learn in the relationship department. And Mercury is past its post-shadow phase here, which is great. And we also have Uranus sextile Venus and Saturn and the North Node. So not bad for cultivating community dynamics or just taking a different approach in a relationship, doing something unconventional. And by this time, Mars is opposing Leo, or sorry, Mars is opposing Pluto. And that's intense. And it is T-squaring the sun and moon. So, April 27th could be again this very intense time where people are defending their values on college campuses, in other contexts, no matter the consequence. And there could be all kinds of movements to help these people, and give them food and supplies. Like, I know that there were college protests last spring as well, but as the temperature gets warmer in the US, I mean, there are going to be students in those on those lawns again, in those tents. So, yeah, expect things to get pretty messy. And I think students are really in the toughest position right now. Like they are the ones who are going to be at the center of they are at the epicenter of the United States' shift in values. Like they kind of represent the crucible of our new value system. Like this is where the new values will be sort of molded, is on college campuses of all kinds. And if you're a student and you don't have a clear sense of values, like this is your time to really, you know, assemble those values. And I'm not telling you what to do. I mean, otherwise, I don't think you should necessarily feel like you have to like be on those lawns. But, you are definitely, you are being asked in some way, I think, to, you know, sort of showcase your values. And also, by the way, this whole month, I just want to add this. There might be some lies revealed about certain health agencies going back to when Fauci was there. Because, like, there's some articles that have come out recently that many of the prominent doctors in the health agencies in 2020 were intentionally suppressing the lab leak theory. Because it very likely came from a lab, but they didn't want that to be known. So I do wonder if there's continual information coming out about that. And by the way, the Libra full moon April 12th is an ending and a culmination, but also maybe a new perspective on relationships. And then the Taurus new moon is a new beginning. Naturally, it's a new moon. And it could be about new values flowing in to better or new relationship outcomes. So let's go into the horoscopes. I know that we've been, again, talking about this ad nauseum, probably. You might not be super interested in the global predictions anymore. But yeah, so let's start off with Aries as per usual. So I'm going to park it with the Libra new moon as or full moon as a reference, but I will discuss the Taurus new moon as well. So Aries, the Libra full moon, April 12th, is significant in your seventh house. It is putting the focus on relationships. And April 12th for you is a time to purge any relationship that's not resonating anymore, any relationship that's not contributing to growth, and any relationship that's not allowing for vulnerability. And with Venus in your 12th house, you've been reflecting and will be reflecting the entire month on your relationships and whether or not you can trust them, whether or not you've been lied to, if you've been idealizing somebody, and ideally you will also be seeking relationships that are spiritually fulfilling. But Aries, you are among the most likely signs to be breaking up with somebody or to just see the truth about what you really want in a relationship. With Mars in the fourth house, some of you are still navigating conflict at home or with your family. And in the 12th house, though, so many of you are focusing on mental health and spiritual practices and ways to adopt different spiritual practices that can improve your mental health and mindfulness. But Aries, this is kind of, in some ways, a quiet month for you, actually. A lot of you are seeking alone time, time away from a partner, or you recently broke up with someone and you just want to chill out. And Venus is in your 12th house, like I said, all month, and so is Saturn. So wait until May to really get things going again in a relationship or with your creativity. Like at that point in May, you're outwardly focused. Right now, you're inwardly focused. And maybe, again, it's not an ending of a relationship, it's just a new phase. But definitely, you will have an emotional connection with someone or an ending with someone. And then the Taurus new moon on April 27th, I believe it's the 27th, that's in your second house. So the Taurus new moon could be the beginning of a new salary, income, value system, and also maybe a new spiritual code or belief system with Venus in the 12th house. And also with Mars in the fifth, you might be really energized to monetize something creative or to indulge in a date. I mean, go on a date with someone to a nice restaurant. You might be competing for someone with a friend. You might be in a love triangle situation. You might also um, just be motivated to invest in your romantic side again. So I think by the end of the month things start to improve a bit. But the beginning of April to me is like purely a think more, do less type of thing. And if you have any addictive tendencies, you'll be reflecting on that. So Taurus, the Libra full moon is in your sixth house of health, physical health, wellness, nutrition, daily routines, coworkers, and pets. So Taurus, the Libra full moon could be the completion of a work project or the revelation about your health or the adoption or the ending of a one routine and the adoption of a new daily routine. Some of you might just feel this emotional connection to your pets. You just might feel like you want to get a pet, or you might decide to invest more time into your pets. But I think a lot of you are focused on health and work during this Libra full moon. And Venus rules the full moon and is in the 11th house. So some of you also will be maybe working on a social media project and like bringing that to a conclusion, or choosing to work with someone else on a social media project. Some of you might even end a friendship there, or you will reaffirm your friendships and realize that, hey, I want to be connected to this person long term. And also, others will be joining new communities, possibly leaving communities, though, with Venus and Saturn, with Mars in the third house. A lot of you have been arguing too much and wasting time arguing. You have to stop doing that. The sun is in the 12th house at that time, so a lot of you are also healing yourself at a deep spiritual level. Maybe working out some past life karma, with Chiron there, working out some past life wounds, healing them. But I do think a lot of you are focused on socializing here and socializing with people who you can trust long term. Or forming partnerships in a social media context. And others are teaching their friends about health or learning about health through their friends. And then the Taurus new moon, April 27th, is a new beginning for you, being a Taurus, obviously. And Mars goes into the fourth house, opposing Pluto in the 10th. So some of you might be fighting a little bit with someone in your home or in your family, or taking charge of your home or family. Others will be, you know, breaking off from their family because they have different values, or also maybe focusing on starting to think about maybe investing in something, investing in property, or maybe starting a new relationship with the new moon in your sign, starting a new friendship with Venus still conjunct Saturn. But, I like the Taurus new moon, but it's like you might feel sort of caught between different priorities with like wanting to transform your career, wanting to invest energy into your home life as well, and your family and your friends. There's a lot going on, basically. But the new moon should really make a statement. It's kind of like you're making a statement about your values, your ethics, and you are allowing that to be this sort of like vehicle for transformation in your career and in your home. And as long as you navigate the conflict in your home wisely, then I think the new moon can be rejuvenating for you. But yeah, really also think about which friends you can depend on, which communities you can depend on here, because that will determine how easy or difficult your April is. Because I think a lot of Tauruses are going to feel really combative starting in like mid-April, late April. So, you know, just try not like pick your battles basically in late April. Otherwise, I think you're going to be seen as sort of like this aggressive, uncompromising person. And that could get kind of annoying. So, just like really don't like dig your heels too much at the end of the month. So, Geminis, you have the Libra full moon in your fifth house of creativity, creative hobbies, joy. It also rules children and the inner child and dates, romance, and so on. So, Geminis, I mean, the Libra full moon could be the climax in some kind of romantic experience. It could also be the end of a situationship that no longer promotes growth. It could be, yeah, a date that just is very exciting and memorable. You might also complete a creative project. You might realize that you'd like to change up one of your creative hobbies, and Venus rules this in the 10th house. So some of you might be hitting a new stride in your career, and making serious decisions about your career, and you might have to sacrifice something in order to further your growth in another career or something. Or you might agree to a certain contract that binds you to a certain career or career path. Others will decide to break away from a job with Venus and Saturn in the 10th, or to stop working with a certain executive or authority figure, or to cut off contact with a certain parent. Others might, you know, cement their, I don't know, status in a certain way in the public. But I think for a lot of Geminis, this is like a creative milestone that you're infusing into your career. So it's like you're accomplishing something creatively that helps you stand out in your career. Or, you are, maybe realizing that you just want to do something more creative in your career, no matter what the cost. And some Geminis are leaving a certain job behind, I think, in order to pursue a creative field, But I think all Geminis are going to have to continue to really focus in on just like a couple things right now in their career or within their responsibilities in order to have the success they want in their career. Because, Venus and Saturn is showing that like you might have some ambitions in a Venusian sense, like creatively, but that some of your creative ambitions might come at the sacrificing of a certain income level for a bit. Or maybe you decide that you are willing to just like work towards a certain career path, in the long run. And anyways, I think a lot of Geminis, though, should ultimately be having kind of like a creative moment, though, as well, at this time. And, your values might be changing with regards to your career right now. So think about like, what do I value like in my career? Like, what is it money? Is it creativity? Is it something else? And maybe, maybe there is a big accomplishment you're making here, but also, how does that put back to your, like, well, what influence do your parents have as well over your career and over your values generally? I think that's a worthy reflective exercise. And then we also have the Taurus new moon on April 27th in your 12th house. That theoretically could be a quiet new moon. It could be the adoption of a new creative or spiritual practice, meditation. You're just going inward. You are, um, just sleeping, resting, having interesting dreams. And Venus continues to conjoin Saturn in your 10th house. So I think throughout April, Geminis are deciding what they are willing to sacrifice for their career, especially economically, financially. And ideally, Geminis are trending towards a career that really stimulates growth, and through that fulfillment and that growth experience, they eventually make more money, but maybe right now they're just kind of like taking it slower. And the Taurus new moon features Mars and Leo in the third house, opposite Pluto in the ninth. So I do think that Taurus new moon might also coincide with a motivation to maybe write or learn new things, read a lot, or argue a lot in some ways, even if it is a quiet new moon. I do think that you're intellectually very stimulated. So, Geminis, you're doing a lot of thinking at the end of the month. Maybe a lot of transportation, a lot of driving, actually. Um, Geminis, you actually should be very careful while driving at the end of April. Yeah, definitely be careful with that. And don't drive on limited sleep. Like, make sure you get enough sleep before you drive. And also, yeah, you might be motivated at the end of April to just kind of like debate, learn, and argue your position quite, you know, intensely. And if you're traveling, travel to places where you feel like where you're safe. Cancers. You have the Libra full moon on April 12th in your fourth house. This could mark a time where you're moving or you are having an emotional experience with your family. You are even like experiencing or a different energy with your family or as a parent. Maybe you are having a new perspective on caregiving. And even if you don't actually move at that time, you might be just starting to explore it. Some of you maybe made some transitions in your career in the early part of April or early March, or sorry, late March. But ultimately, I do think the focus here is on the home. And even if you're not moving, just changing something about your home, the decorations or something. And Mars is still in the first house. I do think that Cancers have had like one of the toughest 7 months of their lives with Mars retrograde in their sign and still in their sign, lingering and squaring Chiron and all this stuff. So, Cancers, I mean, after the Libra full moon, you should feel like things are at least starting to get easier. Venus is in the ninth, so some of you are making these really, big financial commitments to travel, either abroad. Like some of you are booking a really long distance trip, or you're rethinking one and backing away from one. Some of you are making these Herculean efforts to publish something, to get recognized in a media context or a teaching context. I do think a lot of you are teaching, actually, yeah, or going to school, investing in school, and maybe you're committed to, any of these areas. But I think some of you are also picking up new perspectives that are changing the nature of your relationships, like maybe through travel or through something else. But Cancers, I think you have a totally different view of your relationships after the Libra full moon and of your family. You have a totally different perspective on that. Some of you might travel to see your family in mid-April, or you will decide not to travel to see your family. So then we have the Taurus new moon on April 27th, which is in the 11th house of friendships, communities, and social media. This could be the birth of a new friendship, the adoption of a new social media project. You might get involved in a new community in a different way. You might participate in politics. You might start teaching a group of people with the 11th house, ninth house connection. And with Mars going into your second house, you will be maybe aggressively pursuing more money, but also spending too much, indulging too much, and getting into financial disputes potentially. But I think a lot of you are more vehemently pursuing money or spending more money towards the end of the month, especially within a group or community. Like maybe you're spending a lot of money amongst friends or at a party, or maybe you are hosting a party and it costs a lot of money to host the party. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of themes there. Leo, you have the Libra full moon in the third house on April 12th. And this could be the conclusion of a relationship, and you're just talking about it. You're like, hey, the relationship is over. And oh, and for Cancers, by the way, the full moon might be dictating a new perspective on property and how much money you're willing to sink into a property. I think some Cancers are taking a different approach to property investment. But for Leos, you might be communicating the end of a relationship or just having a really serious conversation about a relationship or about money. I actually think a lot of Leos are like recalibrating their investments, spending or reallocating their investments, and maybe navigating debt or taxes, regulations, business regulations. Leos are probably going to have the most dense tax season to work through. Other Leos are doing shadow work in a relationship or debating how to share finances or how to navigate any issues with physical intimacy in a relationship. I think a lot of Leos are focused on financing though, and business creation, regulation, or you're reflecting on whether or not you have this deep connection with someone potentially and having a serious conversation about it. Um, Others might be returning from like kind of a local trip at that time or learning something new about money or finance. And Mars is still in the 12th house. So a lot of you have had trouble sleeping. A lot of you have had trouble sleeping. So reclaim your sleep cycle. Most Leos I know are not sleeping. They're just not sleeping. They're staying up till like 3 or 4 a.m. That has to stop. You just stop, like go to bed earlier. If you're watching this video at 2 a.m., go to bed. Um, and even at this time, if Leos are not getting enough sleep, they're getting pissed off here. They're arguing, they're having emotional conversations, and A lot of Leos here are realizing that they have to sacrifice a certain addiction or addictive habit in order to live a better lifestyle, to live well. Some Leos have had a reality check recently that, hey, they can't continue indulging in whatever it is. So, and I haven't talked about Neptune and Aries in these horoscopes today, by the way. That's for a reason because Neptune doesn't immediately affect everybody like dramatically when it changes signs. It takes like maybe even years sometimes for Neptune to develop there. But I'll do a separate newsletter on my Substack about how Neptune and Aries will affect the signs. So, anyways, Leos, you're reconsidering your investments, your finances, any loans or debt, and financial connections with a partner. And then the Taurus new moon is in the 10th house on April 27th. That might be the initiation of a new career, new responsibility, announcement of something related to parenting. And Mars will be back in your sign by that time. So you're becoming a little bit more ferocious, competitive, daring, risk-loving, and you are a little frustrated though, agitated at times. So just kind of like pick your battles, like I said earlier, for some, I don't remember for what reason, but pick your battles and let April 27th be the genesis of a new reputation, career, public status. And I think that should be pretty rejuvenating. But you also might be continuing to finesse your finances, and whatnot. And also, again, continuing to find that really deep relationship, where you're connected to someone physically, financially, intimately, psychically, and so on. So let's go to Virgos. So Virgos, like Aries, you are among the most likely sign to break up with someone, end a relationship, get divorced, or decide once and for all to sustain the relationship. That's because you have Venus and Saturn the entire month in your seventh house. I mean, this is the most pressure you might ever have, like in your whole life with relationships. I'm just being honest. Like Venus doesn't station in a conjunction with Saturn every day. And especially not when Saturn's at the later degrees of Pisces here at the end of the zodiac, like closing out his transit in your seventh house with Mercury in the North Node there. On that Libra full moon, April 12th, like out of all the signs, except for maybe Aries, like you are definitely going to see the true integrity of your relationships. And whether or not it's worth working towards that relationship, working on it, or some of you will realize you've been dating a pathological liar, or you'll realize that you can't trust that business partner, or that friend, or that romantic partner. And some of you will get a divorce. Others will, again, reinforce their commitments to someone, though. But if you're on shaky ground with a relationship, you're wondering if it should continue, just give it until April 12th to decide. And for some of you, an ex might come back and decide that they want to make it work with you again, and that's up to you to decide if you want to do that. Others might go back to an ex. Some of you are feeling very nostalgic for an ex, I think, right now. But you have to decide if you're willing to actually do that work to make it work again. If you're maybe just pining for the past, like are you deluding yourself? But like Virgos, you have the toughest decisions to make in a relationship. And for some of you, it would be financial with a business partnership because the full moon is in your second house. So you might be cutting ties with someone business-wise, financially, getting a new salary, getting a new job. Some of you will realize you want to become a mentor or a consultant. Or you might be meeting with a financial advisor there, and they're helping you navigate all of this convoluted financial stuff. Mars is in the 11th, so just don't stoke too much conflict in your communities or friendships. You do have Jupiter in the 10th still, which is great. That can be expansive for your career prospects. But right now, I think in the whole month of April to me is centered around your relationships, your one-on-one committed relationships. And you'll be deciding whether or not to go forward with them. But whatever you choose, I think will be for the best. But I think you should be tough. You should be tough on your partner, look at them realistically. Are they really helping you? Or should they go and get a job? Or whatever it is. And then the Taurus new moon, April 27th, is in your ninth house. And the ninth house could be for you the beginning of like a new educational path, long distance trip, a new perspective. Maybe maybe you're interfacing with like in-laws or relatives or something. And Mars will go into your 12th house though. So Virgos, like you have to really manage your sleep cycle starting April 17th and especially on the Taurus new moon. So if you're traveling, maintain proper sleep hygiene. But even on the Taurus new moon, you are continuing to reflect on your relationships. Maybe you're traveling with a partner to celebrate your continued, alliance with each other, or maybe you're traveling to get away and escape from the partnership and just reflect. And in other cases, you, yeah, might commit to a new educational program, like I said. But generally, you should expect to grow into your career over the next couple months and experience growth within it. And there's a partner, maybe a business partner in the seventh house who can help you with that. I think that might be the strategy. And by the way, whatever happens in the relationships for you is for the best because you have the North Node in the seventh right now. But in order to make a relationship work, some of you have to abandon old tendencies because the South Node is in your sign. So now let's go to Libra. I mean, the full moon is in your first house on April 12th. So the Libra full moon will have a profound effect also on your relationships, and it will reveal to you all the subconscious loops and patterns that you have to break in order to make your relationships thrive. And like I think you've been getting in your own way off and on for the past 2 years. So now it's like you're finally letting go of these old tendencies and making space for that partnership to work. And some of you maybe are helping someone, like a partner, heal from a wound or illness or health challenge. And, it's a very emotional moon for you. And it's helping you, again, cast out any tendencies that were leading to stagnation in a relationship. And, you are, I think, feeling a sense of closeness with someone again, hopefully. Or you finally feel like you can let go of the relationship and focus on yourself. Venus is in the sixth, conjunct Saturn, so maybe you are making long-term commitments as well to like a work project, a health routine, fitness routine. Maybe you're bonding with your pets. Maybe you're committing to a certain exercise regimen. I could really see that. Others are committing to a project where they're serving others selflessly. And Mars is in the 10th house. So you're putting energy into your job, into your career, but sometimes like it's a little exhausting, but just like keep at it. And yeah, the full moon here is revelatory for you. I think it's really helping you see which relationships are worth cultivating at work in a work setting, but also who is or which relationships are worth kind of putting the effort into and setting standards for and meeting expectations for. Because like Saturn in the sixth is really asking you to like strive for excellence and put in the work. So like who are you willing to put in the work for? Like I've said for the other signs. But I think for you it's also what kind of alliances do you need to make at work in order to make your work life much more, I don't know, successful. And some of you here are also realizing that you have to pick up new health practices in order to maintain good health. So now the Taurus new moon is in the eighth house on April 27th, and that will be the new beginning of a maybe financial plan, investment strategy. You might be, deepening your connection to somebody financially, physically, intimately, psychically. But I think for a lot of you, it's just a new financial strategy, to be honest. It feels like a pretty practical new moon, but it is squaring Mars in the 11th. So avoid financial conflict with any friends at that time. And also, with Pluto squaring it in the fifth house, maybe or you're investing in a creative project or creative effort financially. Some of you might have a really intimate connection with someone around that time because Pluto's in your fifth now, just kind of intensifying the romantic stuff. But yeah, I think the full moon kind of speaks for itself. I think that, you definitely will have a clear understanding of the longevity of your relationships by the middle part of April. And again, you'll realize like who you can kind of go through life with like day in and day out, and sort of feel like you're actually progressing towards something. That's what I would say. So now we have Scorpio. The Libra full moon is in the 12th house, April 12th. That's a bit of a nebulous spot for the full moon. So it is very spiritually illuminating, theoretically. It could be a time to rest as well, though, to sleep, to relax, to look into your past relationships, maybe what could have gone better, to look into your spiritual practices and your health, especially mental health and spiritual health. And the ruling planet, Venus, is in the fifth house. So some of you will actually also tap into a new kind of romantic relationship, or you will decide you want to let go of a romantic relationship or a situationship. Others will invest more time into a creative effort or a project. You might, solidify it in some cases, a romantic connection, or start to build out a creative project, like I said earlier. Some of you are taking responsibilities as a parent. Others are, you know, realizing that they want to take a bit of a break from the dating scene, which I've talked about in other videos in the past for Scorpios. And but ultimately, I think you are setting some really clear ambitions creatively. And a lot of you will just have like really vivid dreams during that full moon that actually provide you with material for a creative story or idea. And Mars is in the ninth, so you're traveling too much. Scorpios, you're just traveling too much. I don't think you necessarily have to stop traveling. I mean, I've been doing that too much, but it's just something that's just ongoing, right? Like you're just traveling a lot. But try to travel strategically. Don't just like keep traveling at every given opportunity because it might be depleting you. And then we have the Taurus new moon, April 27th in the seventh house. This could be a new relationship for you, new relationship dynamic, new partnership in a business or platonic context. This could be, yeah, you might be working with somebody new one-on-one there. You might be doing a new type of consultation. You might be, with Venus in the fifth, continuing to work with someone one-on-one creatively. You might reinfuse romantic elements into your relationships. But yeah, a lot of Scorpios are spearheading these really exciting new creative efforts, actually, in like throughout the month of April. And Mars will go into your 10th house mid-April and will be in your 10th house during the Taurus new moon. So Some of you are taking charge as a parent. You're conflicting with your parents a bit, maybe, or you're just like burning a lot of energy in your career, which is not a bad idea, but it's just like you're putting a lot of energy into your career starting in late April, which I think should be a good thing for you. And again, some of you might be like Tauruses, experiencing some conflict with family members, but with Mars in the 10th, like you are becoming the authority. But just don't let your career stress you out too much at the end of the month. So now we have Sag. Sagittarius, the Libra full moon on April 12th is in your 11th house. And this might bring some friendships to a conclusion, or you will manifest, I think, something really successful on social media. Others will participate in new communities or leave old communities behind. Venus is ruling this full moon in the fourth house. So I do think a lot of you, though, are focused on property investments. You're focused on, you know, maybe beautifying your property in a different way, investing in new properties, selling old properties. Maybe you moved recently and you've had to leave some communities behind and you're trying to find new ones. Maybe you're realizing how painful it is to move and lose those friends or leave them behind. I mean, others are, you know, even like sharing responsibilities differently within their family. And some of you are investing more into your creativity, even. You do have Jupiter in the seventh, which is nice. More positive experiences in relationships, potentially like one-on-one. But I don't think Jupiter and Gemini in the seventh house is necessarily like the most like lucky transit. It just gives you maybe analysis paralysis about what to do in a relationship because it's like too much information and overthinking what to do about a relationship. So simplified there. Mars is in the eighth, so you're putting a lot of energy into like financing, possessions, shared resources, and also maybe facing some conflict in that area and stress there. But don't let finances stress you out too much, basically, at this time. But I think a lot of you are probably having revelations about friends, disconnecting from some friends, and maybe even reuniting with others. And then the Taurus new moon on April 27th is in your sixth house of health and routine. So by the end of April, it's like, again, maybe some of you moved recently or changed something about your home. Well, by the end of April, you're ready, I think, to really get into a flow with your daily rhythms, whether it's nutritionally, professionally, and also some of you might get a new pet. And Mars will be in Leo at that time in the ninth house, squaring that new moon. You might feel as though your routine is slightly disrupted by the need to travel at one point in the near future, like later in the month. But otherwise, you might just be pushing for new perspectives on health, or yeah, I mean, with Venus and Saturn in the fourth, I think a lot of you are making these tremendous sacrifices for your family or investments. You're coughing up money for your family or to acquire a certain home. So yeah, I think that might be part of the theme throughout the month. But I do think at the end of April there is this sort of like return to a routine, hopefully, a grounding within that routine. And in Taurus, maybe emphasizing natural organic foods and ingredients. So now we have Capricorn. So Capricorn, you have a Libra full moon, April 12th. I'll back it up a day actually, just so we have the date accurate here. Um, So now we have, yeah, the full moon, April 12th in your 10th house. This could be for you a revelation about a type of career that you actually want. Maybe there's a change in demeanor or relationship with a parent. Perhaps you change careers entirely. Maybe you just pick up different responsibilities. You accomplish something pretty big, maybe in the public eye. And Venus rules the full moon in the third house. So some of you are investing in education or talking in the third house about ending a relationship or committing to school eventually. Others are either disconnecting from a sibling or maybe reconnecting with them. But I think a lot of you are realizing the investments you have to make, maybe in your education. Like, I actually think a lot of you are surrendering a career in order to pursue some form of educational path, or you are just isolating a bit and talking to people less often in April. April could be kind of an introspective month for you. You're just like, again, doing a lot of thinking and reading and learning about new things on the side, traveling maybe. Some of you might invest in a road trip there. And I don't know. I think for Capricorns, though, a lot of this has to do with career transitions or just coming to terms with the responsibility of parenting. Mars is still in the seventh house, so you've had a lot of conflicts to face in relationships, one-on-one relationships, but that is subsiding in the weeks and days following. And so, the Taurus new moon is well, sorry, one more thing about that. I talked about this last month as well, but a lot of Capricorns have to really perfect their craft. They have to refine their skills in a certain area. And maybe that requires you to go back to school. Or maybe you just have the skills, but you're not utilizing them in your career fully. But either way, I do think Capricorns, you have a chance to transition into a completely different type of career in the middle of the month. Or you will have a revelation about a parent. It could be about a range of things, but the full moon in the 10th is always a time to look into, the I don't know, the more the emotional and unconscious dynamics within your family. And then the Taurus new moon on April 27th is in the fifth house, which is the house of good fortune. And this new moon could be the birth of like a new creative idea, creative hobby, creative project. Maybe you would be going on a date, taking on a new romantic sort of attitude, or attitude about dating. And Mars will be in the eighth house, so very much you very much could have a very intimate encounter with somebody on a date, a passionate, like physically intimate experience. Others might be getting into some stressful financial situations with Mars in the eighth, but I think Capricorns, you're like fiercely motivated to make more money, to acquire more possessions, build up your financial prowess. Just don't get into conflicts about it. And you're just a couple months away from getting Jupiter in the seventh. And at that point, relationships will get a lot better. But I think right now, like the month of April is a little bit quiet still, I think, for you. Like Capricorns are just not talking that much right now. I just feel like, you'd rather not talk to a lot of people. So use this month to reflect on what you really want to do long term in your career, as a parent, educationally, and maybe some of you are writing. Maybe some of you are investing in a really exciting writing project. Oh wow, switching the days, not the hours, sorry. Aquarius. Aquarius, you have the Libra full moon in your ninth house. So Aquarius, some of you around April 12th will be returning from a long distance trip, taking a long distance trip, taking up a new perspective on higher education, or just changing your perspectives generally. Others may be navigating legal situations in the higher courts. Some of you might be relating differently to like an in-law or a relative or a cousin or something, and maybe even a sibling. Yeah. Some Aquariuses might be um, healing a relationship with a sibling. And also, Venus is ruling the full moon in the second house. So some of you are looking for new sources of income. I think a lot of you are looking for new sources of income, doing something that you're naturally gifted at. And also, some of you are just setting more firm financial objectives. And some of you are just like standing up for your values or really cementing your natural talents and bringing them into your job and monetizing them. And some of you just have new perspectives on relationships and self-worth, and you are standing up for your values in a relationship. And maybe some of you are arguing about money with a partner and budgeting, but I think you'll come to a resolution about that. You have Mars in the sixth, so you are still, I mean, hopefully motivated to like exercise and work out, but like don't overdo it at the gym. Continue to be mindful about how much you're lifting, how much you're running, and whatever you're doing. Um, Jupiter's in the fifth, so creativity is expanding still. And theoretically, you could have some creative breakthroughs, which is nice, and some lucky moments in the creative department. Then the Taurus new moon is on April 27th in your fourth house. So that's setting a new tone in your family, your home, or maybe some of you are moving, um, or you are just grounding yourself in your home life again. And although Mars does enter your seventh house at that time, so some of you could be arguing with your spouse, your marriage partner, your significant other, business partner. So really watch out for like any tension. Like, don't let the relationship stress you out too much at the end of April. But your home is ideally a source of grounding at that time. And if you have like a garden or an outdoor space, spend a lot of time out there or garden or put your feet on the earth and find your center like in a very sort of natural habitat, either near your home or in your home. And some of you might be investing in new furniture for your home with Venus conjunct Saturn in the second, with Venus dispositing that moon in Taurus in the fourth. And then Pisces. The Libra full moon is in your eighth house on April 12th. And this, for some of you, could be an uncoupling financially with a partner, a divorce. Others are realizing that they want to restore physical intimacy with their partner. They want to have a more intense connection or deeper connection. Other Pisces are just shuffling their financial matter, like things around. They're recalibrating their investments, reallocating assets in some way, paying off debt. And I do think a lot of Pisces are realizing that they want to make more money. I think a lot of you honestly are dissatisfied with where you're at financially right now. And you're making some investing changes to meet your financial goals. Some of you are navigating tax season and it's kind of frustrating, maybe. Mars in the fifth is showing that, you are putting energy into creative hobbies, but maybe facing some disagreements with creative partners. Venus and Saturn conjunct in the first is also implicating you in relationships. I mean, relationships could end for you at this time, or you decide that they can keep going. You commit to someone, you get engaged, you propose, although I wouldn't do it during Venus retrograde. I would wait until after. But yeah, I think a lot of you are having relationship revelations, maybe allying yourself with new creative partners or business partners, committing to a new creative project that's really ambitious and sort of long term. And yeah, I think as long as you feel like you're aligned financially with your partner, it should be a totally fine month. But remember, Venus retrogrades in your first house for much of this month, and it stays in alignment with Saturn. So if your relationships are not excellent, then they're going to be tested big time, and some of them might end. But with the North Node in your sign, any relationship that ends is indirectly supporting the long-term growth of who you are and the self-actualization of, of you. So then we have the Taurus new moon on April 27th. That's in your third house. So that could be you learning about something new, maybe something Taurian, like how to plant plants in a garden or something. Others are taking a road trip. Others are just learning something new in general or having a very grounded conversation or learning about health with the square to Mars in the sixth. And, some of you could be arguing with somebody with that square to Mars, but I actually think a lot of Pisces are learning about things they have to change with their health. Or I think a lot of Pisces are realizing they have to put more energy into like working out and strength training in the later part of April. Some of you might relate to your siblings differently in late April. Others will, um, just feel like maybe writing something, doing some creative writing, especially with Venus still in your first house. So, like, if you're a Pisces who's not inspired by your day to day, let Mars and Leo in the sixth reinvigorate you by, injecting some creativity or passion into your job again. And maybe that job is your own thing. You're creative writing or doing something like that. But if you want to take the first part of April or even most of April to just reflect uh, on what you want in a relationship, what your values are, or what you want to accomplish creatively, I think you can do that. Um, so so yeah, I mean, I know I said, and we'll summarize April here. I know I said that April would be like this loud, month relative to March, which I think it is collectively in a lot of ways with the, switch of Neptune into Aries. But as you can see, it is still a very contemplative month. I mean, a lot of people are thinking about relationships, like I said, will they work long term or not? Um, can I sustain this? Is there even a creative project that I can sustain long term and invest in? But we're talking about durable, sustainable investments this month. Like you are seeking stability. I think everybody's seeking some kind of stability in relationships. Who can I trust? Who can I rely on in this crazy world? How can I shore up any financial losses in the wake of like tariffs or economic headwinds? How can I, with the Mars Pluto opposition, be fiercely competitive without being vengeful? And I didn't really talk about that in the horoscopes much, but like every sign at the second half of April is going to become more driven and fiercely monomaniacally competitive, but sometimes to a detriment. So, you know, allow the second half of April to be this sort of reinvigoration, this recharging, but, don't get too obsessed with winning. Otherwise, you might make some enemies along the way. Um, so yeah, I mean, collectively, I do still think there's some international divorces going on between nations. I think trade wars will continue. I think tariffs will hurt. I think healthcare agencies have lied to us for a long time. Some of that will continue to be revealed. I think prescription drugs, certain food items may be bottlenecked in the supply chain. I also think that there might be a breach, cybersecurity attack in the financial sector or social media hack, some TikTok drama, who owns TikTok, who's going to invest in them. The students will be standing up for their values in an even bigger way. There will be a Tiananmen Square type event on a college campus. Um, a prominent leader or financial leader even maybe will be under duress, maybe even an airline executive. Someone may have their assets frozen, like a prominent figure. A financial crime might be committed, and like a high profile one during tax season. There might be some tax fraud going on. The United States will probably lose a lot of tax revenue this year, which will further impact the economy. And I'm probably missing a couple other things, but I think that's the bulk of it. And a lot of people will be, again, either solidifying their relationships or ending them. This is the definitive month for relationships. Like either the ex is coming back or they're not. Either you're staying together or you're getting divorced. Either you're getting engaged in a couple months or you're abandoning the relationship. Like Saturn sets the high bar. It asks you if you really want, or if you're really, really willing to work towards that relationship working. Which I don't like to use the same word twice, but like, are you willing to invest in that relationship's success long term? So, anyways, thank you. Download my 2025 horoscopes if you haven't yet. There's still 9 months in the year, so it's still relevant. I do have a lot of exciting announcements coming, mere hours after I film this. I can't give those away yet, but I do have an exciting announcement for people who live in LA. A new type of astrology show, but look out for that on Instagram. My one-on-one readings are sold out for life, technically. I'm not going to be doing them anymore. I'm focusing on videos, courses, media opportunities, predictive videos like my you know, eventual videos about next year, my classes, and so on. And just maybe exploring retreats, things like that. Eventually, an academy for the spiritually gifted, as you know. But one-on-ones, I've closed out that phase of my career as an astrologer. I feel confident that I have still obviously readings in 2025 for part of 2025, but I feel that the people who have either already seen me or booked with me are meant to see me. I'm meant to, do their reading and, really work through something with them and, help them, help guide them. But beyond that, I just think that I'm being called to do a different sort of to focus on my astrology in different contexts. But anyways, if it's not to say that I wouldn't have retainer clients eventually. So, TBD. We'll see what happens. But what was I going to say? Yeah, I don't know. Oh yeah, subscribe to my Substack and listen to my podcast as well. I know there's a lot of different channels going on here. But thank you so much. I'm Evan Nathaniel Grimm, and I hope you have a highly successful month of April. Take care.